Welcome to the show. This week is going to be a little bit different because this is our special election edition. Even if you hate politics, love me. Stay here with me for the entire show, and I'm going to have a special guest with me here for the entire course of this week's show, and that is Chris Regan, who's my law partner, former national debate champion, former vice chair of the West Virginia Democratic Party. And Chris, it's good to have you here.
Great to be here, Jamie. How's everything going on the show when you don't have me here?
It's going well, and big news for you this week. Congratulations, the birth of your second daughter this week.
That's right.
So congratulations to you and Hillary on your birth of your child.
Ivy Street Regan was born yesterday. She's as cute as she can be, and I really should get back to the hospital. But because an informed populace is the heart and soul of democracy, I've taken this half hour out to be with you and talk about this election.
Well, let's get right down to it because we only have so much time here. We've got a number of races we want to cover. We're going to talk about, we'll start at the top, we'll start with president, but we want to work our way down through some of the West Virginia races for Senate, House, sheriff's race here in Ohio County. We'll talk a little bit about the Ohio U.S. Senate race, and we'll also talk a little bit at the end just about maybe some of our predictions on what may happen. But let's start with president. There's been a lot of attention obviously given to this race, probably more than people want to hear, but let's just give our little analysis of it here because you can't really do a show on the election without talking about Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. And Chris, here it is in a lot of activity this week.
Well, a couple weeks ago, Jamie, you had me on the show, maybe a month ago before that first debate, and we outlined a strategy for Trump to maybe win the election and turn it around. He needed to go in those debates, act normal, calm down, just try to seem like a regular Republican and not sort of the wild man that he's been. And he kind of went a different way, didn't he? Shouting wrong into the microphone, getting in a fight with a beauty queen, sort of falling apart at the end of the last two debates, and I think he really lost his chance to win the election. But something interesting is happening that's still worth talking about, which is that he is now losing ground in states like Texas and Arizona, but gaining a little bit of ground in places like Ohio and Pennsylvania. Also losing ground in Nevada compared to the standard Republican, meaning he's losing a lot of Hispanic voters. Those places on the southern border have a lot more Hispanic voters and Hispanic Americans than some of the industrial upper Midwest. And by doing that, he's redrawing the map. We've seen a close election in Texas and Arizona, which you would never expect the Republican to have a problem in, but also him sort of creeping up on Ohio and trying to creep up on Michigan, although I don't think he's having as much success there. So we could see a different lineup than we saw in either of the Obama-Romney and Obama-McCain elections.
One interesting question here is how is this going to affect things down ballot in those other states? Is it going to spill over in terms of he's gaining ground in, Clinton's gaining ground in Texas, Arizona, states that you mentioned? Will that affect things in those states down ballot? Will things be affected elsewhere by what's going on at the top of the ticket?
Yeah, I mean, historically, you are only able as a down ballot candidate to outrun the top of the ticket by so much. 4 or 5 points would be considered a lot. So if the president is dragging you down in those races or lifting you up in those races, that's about the most effect it can have. But Trump is a different phenomenon, and so we could see some ticket splitting. A lot of people have talked about the idea that maybe people want to vote Trump in as president, but restrain him by voting for the other side in the Senate, or the other way around, that people feel like, well, we can't have Trump, but we need Republicans in the Senate to restrain Hillary Clinton. So that's going to be something to watch as well.
With respect to, let's turn to the state level a little bit. Trump with a comfortable lead by all accounts here with respect to polling in West Virginia. But Jim Justice leading in the polls for the governor's race against Republican Bill Cole, who's the president of the West Virginia Senate right now. Does that hold up, and what's the effect there, and why do we see, at the national level, Trump with such a big lead, but Jim Justice, and I think that maybe the big answer may be Cole,
I mean, Justice leading steadily in that race. I've never seen any public polling since the race came out that didn't show Justice with a big lead over Bill Cole. And so you have to believe, since just about every poll reports that Justice is well ahead, that Cole is headed for a serious defeat, which is going to be tough on him. I mean, he's been running for governor really since he got into the Senate. I mean, he put together that Republican majority that took over in 2014 as a boost to his gubernatorial race, which doesn't seem to have gained the traction. And perhaps it is because he's running against, a certified coal operator in Jim Justice and the continuing magnetism that has for West Virginia voters.
I think there may be a different factor at play here. What I look at is, what do Donald Trump and Jim Justice have in common? They're both first-time candidates. They're both anti-establishment. And I think people here in West Virginia are looking for change. Maybe they're not happy with the way things have been going. Bill Cole, president of the Senate. Hillary Clinton been in politics for a long time, and people are saying we want something different, we want something new. We want maybe people, and they look at, these people who have run businesses and been very successful in doing it by all accounts are billionaires. So it's interesting the dynamic there and how that may play out.
Certainly. I mean, the mood in West Virginia has been anti-establishment all along. I think that's a great point, and some people do want to just flip the table upside down, bring in new blood, and see what that brings us, because we obviously don't feel like West Virginia has been performing well over the years, so maybe a complete change of scenery is what we need.
We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue talking about some of these West Virginia statewide races, and we'll also focus on some of the local races here in West Virginia. Stay with us on the Jamie Bordas Show.
You know, Danoon Lumber is the place for quality natural hardwoods. And now you can take advantage of these offers to get your home ready for the holiday season. 3 1/4-inch red oak tongue and groove flooring for $425 per square foot. Just in time for Christmas. Children's rocking chairs only $115. Add the wow to any room with rustic walnut barn doors. As we always say, better grade, better selection, better price, better hurry. Danoon Lumber.
Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration has been restoring homes after disasters for nearly 4 decades. Through that experience, we present Panhandle Custom Homes, Kitchens, and Baths. We handle your entire project, from concept to completion, working with you every step of the way. From the budget-minded upgrade to a fully custom remodel, you can trust the Panhandle name. Panhandle Custom Homes, Kitchens, and Baths. Welcome home.
Welcome back to our special election edition of the show. Been talking here with Chris Regan, my law partner, former national debate champion, former vice chair of the Democratic Party here in the state of West Virginia. And we've been talking a little bit about the statewide races, Chris, especially the governor's race. But let's turn our attention to another race that's not only been receiving a lot of attention, but also a lot of money. And that's the Attorney General's race here in West Virginia. Incumbent Patrick Morrissey, a Republican, being challenged by Doug Reynolds, who's been in the House of Delegates for a number of years now, from the Huntington area. And basically Doug Reynolds says, look, I don't want an out-of-state person in this Attorney General seat like Patrick Morrissey is. I don't want someone who he believes is beholden to these drug companies, and he views this drug epidemic we're having here in West Virginia as a big deal, as do I, particularly because I have 5 children who it scares me about what may happen when they get older and these drugs are going all around. And Doug Reynolds is saying, I want to do something about this. I'm running for Attorney General, and it's gotten a lot of attention, not just statewide, but also national money pouring into this race.
Well, yeah, that's right, Jamie. I mean, I would think any of your viewers, if they're watching us, I mean, almost if you own a TV in West Virginia, you're seeing ads about this Attorney General race because it has been so hotly contested. And the issue that you raise there, with Patrick Morrissey essentially having been caught red-handed by CBS News on 60 Minutes, receiving millions of dollars in payments, at least to his family, and then some personally to himself, and then also campaign contributions, all from the pharmaceutical industry. And then there's a series of exposés in the Charleston Gazette about how that money has really fueled his campaign, but at the same time, those companies are using that money to pump millions of prescription pills into southern West Virginia, into this part of West Virginia as well, to fuel that epidemic, basically allowing pill mills to shovel them out to create addicts. And that's a huge problem. And when you have a conflict of interest like that, you know, your campaign for your Attorney General is funded by the very people you need to stop from bringing those pills in. Doug Reynolds has a great issue, and he's been pointing it out in a lot of advertising.
Yeah, this election will be interesting for another reason also. You know, as we said, Patrick Morrissey came in from outside West Virginia to kind of 4 years ago, ran for Attorney General, had not been a lifelong West Virginian by any means. Doug Reynolds grew up in West Virginia, been here, and I think has a pretty bright future ahead of him in politics if he wins this race. So this is, I think, a great examination of politics in West Virginia for a number of reasons, in terms of not just who's going to win this race, but what are the futures of these two people going to be in politics? You know, is Morrissey going to be someone who continues to rise and looking toward other offices? Or is Doug Reynolds, who grew up here in West Virginia, has lived here his whole life, has a family that he's raised here, going to be the guy that does that? So I'm really eager to see what happens in this race for that reason also.
Right, and the campaigns, not only homegrown versus foreign grown, also the money. I mean, both the governor's candidacy, Bill Cole, and Patrick Morrissey, the main funders are the Republican Governors Association and the Republican Attorney General Association. Those are out-of-state groups that have put, I think, $12 to $15 million behind those two candidates. But they raise their money also from the drug companies, from the Koch brothers, from industries around the country. That's not West Virginia money. Whereas Justice and Reynolds are both successful West Virginians who make their lives here, their families live here, they do a substantial amount of their business here. So it's interesting to see how the two parties line up. The Republicans are able to get a lot of support from out of state to try to take over control in West Virginia. And you wonder, like, what are the people who are spending that money, what do they expect to get in return? What do they think they're taking out of West Virginia to compensate for that? Whereas in this case, Reynolds and Justice are both kind of putting their money where their mouth is and where their life is by investing in the state where they make their lives. So it's a big contrast there, and I think voters need to pay attention to where that money's coming from.
I want to talk about one other race, which is the West Virginia Agriculture Commissioner's race. Not one you would normally think of, not one I would normally think of, but I had an opportunity to have a meeting with our current Agricultural Commissioner, Walt Helmick, not too long ago, and he's running for re-election. I said, why do you run for Agriculture Commissioner? I mean, you've been in a number of different political positions, in the State House. Why run for Agriculture Commissioner? And his answer was not something I expected. He said, the reason I did, and the reason I'm running for re-election is I believe that this position can do something about the economy in West Virginia. He said, we have a tremendous opportunity to use agriculture to grow West Virginia's economy, kind of figuratively and literally. He said, we have a great opportunity to grow things like potatoes. He said, the Eastern Panhandle is a great example, that there is a huge population base within a very short number of miles surrounding the Eastern Panhandle because of Baltimore and Washington, D.C. And he said, those people need to eat. He said, and we can grow that food and supply that, and it can be a great boost to West Virginia's economy if we just put our minds toward doing that. So that's the reason that he was running, and he said, I think I can make a difference there. So it's not what you would expect to hear usually from an agricultural commissioner who you would normally think is kind of regulating agriculture, and he wants to do those things too. He's done those things, but also wants to continue to try to develop the economy in West Virginia through that position. He defeated his opponent, Kent Leonhardt, 4 years ago for this position. Then Kent Leonhardt ran for Senate, representing the 2nd Senatorial District, and is now, I guess, willing to abandon that post if he wins this rematch with Walt Helmick, which I have concerns about. I mean, you just got elected to that post 2 years ago. Now you're willing to abandon it, the people that elected you to that. But he wants, I guess, the rematch with Walt Helmick. But I really like what Walt Helmick has done and is going to do in a race that wouldn't normally get my attention. So I've been endorsing Walt Helmick, and I think he could do great things for the state.
Well, this is something I think every position in government people need to start thinking about, maybe everything below the presidential level, is this person running for the job because they want to do the job and they care about the job? Or are they running simply to advance a political career? When you see Leonhardt take a job, he can't get the agricultural job, so he takes the Senate job, then he dumps the Senate job to go to the agriculture job. And he's hopping from place to place trying to move up the ladder. That's one thing, but you see Walt Helmick wants to actually do the job of Agriculture Commissioner. I'm not sure that his opponent really knows what it is, other than that it's up the chain of where he is. Morrissey, that issue too. He was looking at governor, trying to find a way to get to Congress. Are you advancing a political career, or are you advancing a public servant who's going to work for us? Because let's face it, there's work to do, and that's part of why I think Walt Helmick is a great candidate.
We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll start talking about some of these local Senate and House of Delegates races. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
Every day, more than 70,000 puppies and kittens are born in the United States. Just one female can contribute more than 2 million offspring in 8 years. At the Tiffany DeLess Spay and Neuter Clinic, we are trying to help. We offer reduced cost services to income-qualified families from all over the Ohio Valley. We understand that the cost of owning a pet can be overwhelming, and that stress multiplies when they do. Call the Tiffany DeLess Spay and Neuter Clinic or visit us online to find out if we can help you.
People always ask me what it means to be a dealer for the people. For the people is a simple idea. It means we believe that everybody deserves to drive a nicer, newer car. This belief drives the entire team at Robinson Auto Group to care more, to try harder, and to work smarter. Whatever's keeping you from driving that car you want, I guarantee we'll try our best to help you. We're Robinson Auto Group, and we're the dealer for the people.
Welcome Welcome back to our special election edition of the show. With me here today is my law partner, Chris Regan, who is also the former national debate champion and former vice chair of the West Virginia Democratic Party. And Chris, let's talk about some West Virginia statewide politics, but here on the local level, which is the Senate races that are going on. The Republicans hold an 18 to 16 majority right now in the West Virginia Senate, but there's a lot of thought that the Democrats could flip control back this election cycle. Let's start off with West Virginia in the 1st Senatorial District. Jack Yost, an incumbent seeking re-election and being challenged by Ryan Weld, a member of the House who's now going to run for the Senate, and been a lot of attention to that race, a lot of back and forth, and that's a key race here in this determination as to who will have the majority.
Yeah, and we're starting to see, that sort of take shape because, Ryan Weld, I think probably at the behest of the Republican leadership, the Cole, Carmichael, Armstead leadership, had to take a bunch of votes that were anti-labor, anti-working people, and that very much, I think, will hurt him here in the Northern Panhandle. Things like right to work and prevailing wage. I mean, he had to be a part of those things that are very hostile to workers. And now when he gets attacked on that, he's running ads saying, well, I don't want to be negative. But, as you know from being a lawyer, sometimes when you say you don't want to respond to something, it's because you don't have a response. And it seems that he does not want to respond to that because he doesn't have a response, and that may really be an issue for him.
Yeah, and the negative things are more in terms of tying him to the same leaders of his party who are supporting those things, who are supporting the bills, the right to work bills, the repeal of prevailing wage, things like that. And that's just basically saying, hey, these are the people he votes with.
Right, exactly. And people may not understand who don't know exactly how our legislature works, but the Senate presidency and the Speaker of the House position, which party is in control, dominates the legislature. The person in the party who is in control can take anybody off any committee, controls the agenda completely. It's very, very harsh on the minority. And so by electing Bill Cole as Senate president, that cooked the books, that we were going to have right to work, that we were going to have prevailing wages taken away from our construction workers, and Weld was a part of that.
Let's talk about the next district down, which is West Virginia Senate 2. That was Jeff Kessler's seat now for almost 20 years. Of course, he gave up that seat to run for governor, did not get his party's nomination for governor, but now that seat is open and is being contested between Lisa Zukoff, who is the Democratic candidate, and Mike Maroney, who's the Republican candidate. They're also a third-party candidate, we should mention. H. John Rogers running as a Libertarian candidate, and that may actually affect things somewhat. But here you have these two Marshall County residents running in a 9-county district for Jeff Kessler's seat. Of course, that's one of the 16 the Democrats do have, so that's important as well. Lisa, of course, is touting herself as being for the blue-collar worker, against things like the right to work bill, for the repeal of prevailing wage. Mike Maroney, a radiologist, doctor, being supported heavily by the healthcare industry, and is also a member of the Republican Party who is for those things. So very hotly contested race there in the Senate 2 race.
Yeah, and recruited by Bill Cole. I didn't really see a lot until finally an ad went up for Maroney that has recently been seen. But before that, his persona was simply sort of a elect me and I'll stop Obama type of person, which is something you see a lot of in West Virginia because of President Obama's tremendous unpopularity. But what's strange about it is the West Virginia State Senate can't do anything to Obama. Not while he's president, not after he's gone, because they really operate in two totally different schemes. So again, with Lisa Zukoff, it's somebody who has a lot of ideas about how to improve education, improve how our government works, versus somebody who's trying to sort of pretend to be part of the presidential race when you're not. We need state senators who are going to get legislation for us that advances West Virginia, not people who are just sort of feeding the cable news buzz of whatever's going on nationally, because that national politics doesn't filter down to us in any concrete way in terms of policy making in the Senate. The Senate can't change what the Congress does.
Let's turn to the House races. Specifically, I want to talk about the 3rd district here. We've got 2 incumbents running for re-election, Erica Storch and then Sean Fluharty, who's just finishing his first term. Erica, of course, being a Republican, Sean being a Democrat, and they're both seeking re-election, and both have broad-based support. But there's another Republican in the race this time, Scott Reed, who's putting his hat in the ring. He's run before unsuccessfully, but running again. And this time, it'll be very important in terms of that House race here in Ohio County to see are we going to have 2 Republicans, or will it continue to be 1 Republican, 1 Democrat here in the House?
That's right, and I think that's one of the easier races to handicap. Eric Storch ran, of course, several thousand votes ahead in the last election, and I think stands an excellent chance of being reelected to her seat. And I think Sean Fluharty also has really solidified his position as one of the young leaders in the Northern Panhandle, one of the young leaders in all of West Virginia. He ran 3 times, as you recall, to get that seat. And really made the most of it down in Charleston, supporting working people, supporting all of our contractors up here and the people who work for them in the Northern Panhandle where construction is so important. His opponent really hasn't got out there, doesn't have much name recognition, and I think we're going to see the same delegation, Storch and Fluharty, go back in from Ohio County.
You know, and I want to mention something about Erica. You know, one of the things I do like about Erica is that she's a more moderate Republican than a lot of the ones you've seen. She doesn't always vote along the party line. She's separated at times, and she even has had some labor backing on occasion. Not across the board, but has had some. But Erica is somebody that will listen. She'll sit down and hear what you have to say and will consider things. And I think that's part of what has gotten her reelected time and time again, is because she will listen. And then also, when you look at Sean's a fighter. You know, Sean is somebody that stands up for what he believes in, and what he believes in is the everyday person. He doesn't believe in, you know, big corporations, out-of-state entities getting all the breaks. He believes, let's do things the right way. Let's fix our roads. If you come in here from out-of-state and tear up our roads, then fix them. Pay for part of them. Do the things you should do responsibly, and that's part of why I like Sean so much. Is he believes he bleeds blue and gold. There's no doubt.
And also drug testing the legislature.
Yeah.
They said drug test people. He said, well, drug test us first.
Yeah.
I think that people appreciate that.
I also like that he gave back, you know, his salary. He donated his salary for the extra session on trying to pass the budget. He said, hey, we didn't do it on time. I'm going to donate my salary for doing that. So I like that as well. But
shows a lot of integrity.
Yeah. We need to take a break. Stay with us here, and we'll talk about a few more of the local races and maybe even make some predictions. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
At Progressive Bank, our loan process is unique. It's personal. Our local lenders ease your mind and help you get the loan you need and deserve. Progressive Bank. Personal bankers with millions to lend to local families and businesses. Come in, Ohio Valley. We're lending.
Fighting for homeowners.
Fighting for workers.
Fighting for children.
Fighting for mineral owners.
Fighting for patients.
Fighting for policyholders.
Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
Progressive Bank understands borrowing money can be a daunting experience. Our local lenders ease your mind and help you get the loan you need and deserve. Progressive Bank. Personal bankers with millions to lend to local families and businesses. Come in, Ohio Valley. We're lending.
Welcome back to the show, our last show before the big election. This is our special election edition. I've been talking here with Chris Regan, my law partner and the former national debate champion, former vice chair of the West Virginia Democratic Party. And we have a race for sheriff here in Ohio County. My personal favorite sheriff is Woody from Toy Story because I get a lot of that at my house. But we do have a race here in Ohio County, Chris, and we have a current sheriff who's term limited. You get 2 terms of 4 years each in Ohio County, and same throughout West Virginia. And so we've got Tom Howard running as a Democrat and John Powell as a Republican here to replace our current sheriff. And, you know, they both had close races in the primary, and I think this could be another close one.
Well, I mean, it doesn't come much closer than Powell's race, of course, decided by just 2 votes. As you will recall, they had to canvass it, check, make sure, but he did get that nomination. The thing that stands out to me about the race is local law enforcement experience. Tom Howard, 21 years on the force in Wheeling, is going to know all the players and have the roots throughout the local law enforcement community. Whereas Powell brings a different set of skills, but doesn't have that. I mean, just doesn't have a track record in local law enforcement. And I think that's something that people will have to consider carefully in making a vote for sheriff. I mean, obviously that's a critical position for how our county is run, and we need somebody who can hit the ground running and make sure that we're kept safe.
That's a race we'll keep an eye on. And, you know, I'm going to be covering the election on election night on WLU-TV, West Liberty's TV station, Channel 14 locally here on Comcast, and be on that night with Howard Monroe up at West Liberty. And that's one of the races I'm sure we'll be keeping an eye on to see what happens there, because a lot of interest here in Ohio County on that race. Another local race that's got some attention here, that's Belmont County Commissioner. And it's getting a lot of attention because there's a 3-person race. You know, you have Mike Bianconi on the Democratic side and J.P. Dutton is the Republican, but Brian Shambaugh has thrown his hat into the ring as an independent. Brian, of course, former Marshall County Commissioner, but moved to Belmont County a couple years back and is living over there now, and gave up his seat as a Marshall County Commissioner a couple years ago, and now he's running as an independent there. And I like Brian a lot. I know him well, and he gives a lot of thought to every decision he makes, whether it be in business or politics, and really examines the issues. And really eager to see what happens there with that three-person dynamic and how that affects things.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly an experienced player, and going the independent route, kind of the outsider way of doing things. I actually saw Dutton, I think it was, made a comment to the effect that he had spent either 7 or 12 years on Capitol Hill. And I just saw that, and I mean, that was a statement directly from him, and I thought, who is doing that? Who is running as, I'm coming from Washington, let me bring Washington politics to Belmont County? I thought that was a peculiar strategy.
Yeah, not a lot of people like Washington politics, there's no doubt. So that's a race that'll be interesting to watch and see what happens there, and how that three-person race shakes out, because, of course, you need a lot less percent to win, when there are 3 people involved like that. Speaking of Ohio, there's a U.S. Senate race there between Ted Strickland and Rob Portman, and people thought this would be a pretty close race, but it looks like Portman's just pulled away.
Yeah, I mean, Ted Strickland, former governor, and a really strong candidate that the Democrats felt they had for that race. But, I mean, really more than anything wrong that he did, Portman just turned out to be a juggernaut in fundraising and also running a really excellent campaign. I mean, he's got an ad out helping people with drug addiction issues that he's championed in Washington. And when you see that ad and halfway through you're like, wow, this is the Republicans' ad, you realize he's very likely to prevail there.
Chris, we've only got a couple of minutes left. I want to get a couple of predictions from you before we have to sign off here. First of all, with this Attorney General's race, with you being an attorney, knowing some of the players, et cetera, what's going to happen here in this West Virginia Attorney General's race between the incumbent Patrick Morrisey and the challenger Doug Reynolds?
Well, the most recent news I have, just before I came in here, I saw news reporting that Patrick Morrisey had sought and obtained another $1 million from the out-of-state group, the Republican AG Association, to pour into more ads, which is like good news for the TV stations, but I think it's bad news for Morrisey. I think he's hitting the panic button because he's behind in the polls. And I think Doug Reynolds, the multi-generation West Virginian, is going to be one of the most prominent Democrats going forward in West Virginia, because I think he's going to pull out this race.
All right, Chris, and then a quick prediction here on the West Virginia State Senate. Do the Republicans retain control? They have an 18-16 majority now, or does it flip back to the Democrats?
Well, if incumbents mainly hold their position, that will favor the Republicans. But the Democrats have a great slate of challengers, particularly in southern West Virginia. And if it's a bloodbath where a lot of seats change hands both ways, that's where I think the Democrats can win it. They need an exciting election night to win, and I think they can do it with the strong challengers they recruited. But if a form holds, it's going to be tough for them to gain ground.
Thanks for being with us again here this week, Chris. Enjoyed it. Hope all of you get out there and vote. Make sure you go to the polls. It's important to exercise that right to go to the ballot, cast it, make sure that the person you want has a chance.